Sonic, the heart of your system.
Hi guys, it's Silas from Kit Guru, and today I'll be taking a look at the Drakonia 2 gaming mouse from Sharkoon. With the recent release of Game of Thrones, the Drakonia 2 struck me as kind of perfectly timed. The aesthetics are certainly interesting, and although they invoke a sense of kind of magic and wizardiness in me, they might cause a bit of a Marmite-like rift with other users. The Drakonia 2 does feature a number of interesting additions, such as RGB lighting and a total of 12 programmable buttons, but it'll be interesting to see what other options and features Sharkoon hope will justify the £36.99 price point. So in the box we find the mouse itself, a manual and a couple of cool accessories, a little carry case and a set of spare feet as well. There is a little bit of choice with mouse models. One is going to be in black and the other one in green. Although we are looking at technically two different versions, fundamentally they are exactly the same, just essentially a shift in that aesthetic. Taking a look at the mouse itself, again, one of the most striking parts is going to be the top. As the name implies, the Drakonia 2 features a full cover dragon scale type print, which along with the host of buttons may be more targeted towards MMO gamers. The mouse's dimensions come in at 127 by 83 by 42 millimeters, slightly wider with flared sides. Weight is also an interesting one as there is some flexibility on the total weight. The Drakonia 2 features an internal weight system hidden away at the base. There are 5 weights in total, each weighing 5.6 grams. This allows you to drop the Drakonia 2 down to 106 grams or keep all 5 installed for the full fat 134 grams. Accessing the weights requires opening a small plastic hatch, and the weights are held in place with a kind of pressure fit by sort of like a small foam insert. Along with the weight system, on the base of the mouse we have the 4 feet, front, back and both sides, and the Pixart 3360 optical sensor. Although the mouse has a pretty symmetrical design, there aren't any buttons on the right, but the left hand side has been kitted out with a full 6 programmable buttons and they're backlit as well. There is also a 4-bar LED indicator for DPI adjustments. In terms of function for the top of the mouse, you have, as expected, both right and left clicks, plus and minus DPI buttons, and a further F or kind of like function button. You also have an RGB illuminated scroll wheel and backlit dragon emblem, which can be customized to suit your lighting preferences in the included software. The attached USB cable is a full 180 centimeters long and braided, which is nice. Interestingly, the cable braiding also matches the mouse's colorway. In the hand, there were a couple of negative comfort points, but overall the mouse feels pretty solid. There's no real flex or creaking to the mouse when in use, and even though the weights for the internal weight system are only held in place with a kind of pressure fit, there isn't any rattle either, even when you're really giving the mouse a proper shake, which is great. The Drakonia 2 is primarily made out of a glossy plastic though, which does make the mouse feel a little bit less premium. The sides of the mouse have been given a textured kind of finish, but this doesn't add a huge amount to the overall grip of the mouse. The top of the mouse being the main contact point with your hand means that you're always going to be touching very glossy plastic, which to me just feels a little bit slippy. This though is kind of necessary to get the dragon scale print onto the mouse, so I can understand why this is the route that Sharkoon have taken. It's kind of a trade-off they have had to make. Glossier plastic with the print rather than like a soft touch or more textured matte finish. Looking at how the mouse feels in the hand though, it's actually pretty comfortable. For me, although a little bit shorter in height than most mice I use on a daily basis like the Logitech MX Master and Corsair Iron Claw, I found the Drakonia 2 comfortable both in a palm grip or with just my fingertips and gripping the sides a little bit more. This being said, I don't have massive hands, but I did find accessing the left-hand side buttons a little bit tricky. This was more so the forward number 1 button. Unless I really pressed my hand forward over the mouse to the front, I wasn't really able to make contact with that first button. For button feel in the side, it's nice and clicky and you can definitely tell when they have been pressed. Being precise though with the clicks was a little bit trickier though. Numbers 2 to 5 were easy enough, but 1 and 2 buttons have small cuts channeled into them which make them a little bit harder to discern quickly. It kind of feels like there are 8 buttons on the side rather than just 6 when your hand is rested on the mouse, and I would find myself trying to click parts of buttons 1 or 6 expecting it to be kind of its own button. Moving to the top of the mouse, both right and left clicks feature on-RON switches, which is great and feels really reassuring. A definite click when engaged. The mouse wheel also feels tactile, moving forwards and backwards. Clicking the scroll wheel also nice and tactile, but it doesn't sit particularly proudly from either left or the right hand mouse buttons. So I did have a little bit of trouble trying to find it, being a little bit more accurate when reaching for it. Reaching does also apply to the F and DPI up and down buttons. I tried to favour keeping my thumb more central within the 1 to 6 buttons on the left hand side, which did push my hand quite far forward over the front of the mouse. This meant a little bit of a stretch to reach these top buttons. Certainly still doable, just not really on the fly as it were. So the Drakonia 2 actually packs in quite a few features. Things like the adjustable weight system works really well, even though quite simply implemented. And the mouse feels overall pretty solid. But how well does it actually perform? Well, it's actually a pretty versatile mouse. The PixArt 3360 sensor offers 1000 Hz max polling rate and DPI from 100 to 15,000. I tend to prefer 1800 DPI, so although I varied slightly, I basically set this and left it. The same can be said for the weight system, although I played around with this a bit, for the majority of my testing, primarily removing all of the weights to make the mouse as light as possible. I will say it was a little bit hard to discern a difference with all the weights installed, as you are only really increasing overall weight by about 28 grams. In terms of games, I put the Drakonia 2 through its paces with a couple of shooters, Overwatch and Apex Legends. In both I found precision to be on point, no issues with tracking, and to me the mouse performed just as well as dearer gaming mice I've tested recently. Really the only issue I found in these faster paced titles kind of came down to the side buttons. Although initially I tried mapping each of these buttons to a separate command because I found them a little bit too small at times and a little bit too hard to reach, I ended up favouring keeping my hand more planted and just using kind of buttons 3, 5 and 6. Playing games like Davinci Original Sin 2 really had the Drakonia 2 come alive. Some time was spent mapping out the buttons to my preferences, but as expected, the convenience of not really having to reach for your keyboard was pretty cool. Being able to easily launch commands, spells, attacks, etc. all directly from the mouse makes the additional 6 side buttons super useful and just saved a bunch of needless clicking around on the screen. Setting up all these buttons is a definite must though, and requires the Drakonia 2 software. Once installed and up and running, you're greeted with the button and speed customization screen first. From a general use and productivity standpoint, it's certainly worth making some changes here. Typically you would expect to find at least 2 of those side buttons to control say forward and backward, but they are all mapped as default key numbers 1 through 6. What is great though is that you can have up to 5 profiles which can be stored directly on the mouse itself. So although it's definitely useful to have the software to hand, if you need to move the mouse to a different system, it will carry across those changes. This means you can essentially just set the mouse up, apply changes, and you're ready to go for the foreseeable future. When customizing, there are a number of standard commands for setting up things like, as I mentioned, forward and backwards commands, multimedia commands, play and pause, and macros as well. One I really liked, which didn't require setting up multiple kind of key commands or change, was copy and paste, which proved to be super useful with buttons to spare. As mentioned, every button is programmable, so you can really spend a ton of time personalizing the mouse. There are also adjustments for acceleration, pointer and scroll speeds, double clicking speeds, and polling rates as well. DPI adjustment is also very specific rather than just kind of jumping from one DPI number to another. You can move up and down in 100 DPI increments using the sliders. This can be a little bit fiddly at times, but both X and Y can be set independently. RGB lighting can also be adjusted. Options like color cycling, pulsating and static are all present, along with speed and brightness adjustments. You can also set up each individual profile of the 5 with its own color, which helps hugely when flicking through different profiles and being able to tell which one you're currently on. There are also options for setting up macros with a full kind of macro manager, so overall the software is actually pretty comprehensive. There weren't really any features I found to be lacking. So to summarize, it's pretty clear from the outset that Sharkoon are kind of expecting the Drakonia 2 to meet the requirements of MMO gamers, but I was actually surprised at how versatile it turned out to be. I had no issues from a performance perspective. Even in faster games where more accuracy can be required, the Drakonia 2 worked without issue. The large number of programmable buttons also worked really well, and being backed up with onboard storage means that you can set up the mouse for say 4 of your favourite games and 1 potential profile for say productivity, and simply switch between them without any need for the software at all. This, I must say, makes a little bit more sense for the included carry case, as the onboard storage makes the Drakonia 2 significantly more portable. The overall build of the mouse is nice and solid, and although I had a few issues with reaching the various buttons, this is kind of a little bit subjective, and those with larger hands probably wouldn't find this as much of an issue. To me, the £37 price point is totally justified, and you do get a long list of features like adjustable weights as well. As mentioned initially, Sharkoon are taking such a bold move aesthetically with the dragon scale print, which might be a bit of a kind of Marmite area, and by doing so, Sharkoon might have dissuaded potential users who could see this as potentially a perfect mouse for themselves. The black version also looks really good, but it might have been safer to also just produce maybe like an all black version without the print entirely. All this being said, for £36.99, the Drakonia 2 represents pretty good value for money, for a mouse that's a little bit more MMO favourable. If, like me, you find the dragon scale print to be pretty funny and unique, it's definitely one to look at. But let's know what you think in the comments below. As mentioned, I can see this mouse may be dividing gamers a little bit, but as always, let us know your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this review, maybe give it a thumbs up, it's always appreciated, and if you would like to see more videos from KitGuru, make sure to hit subscribe and click the bell icon below. At KitGuru, we have also recently opened up our new merch store, where you can pick out some cool KitGuru gear, and if you would like to support KitGuru further, make sure to check out our Patreon page linked below. I've been Silas from KitGuru, and I will see you in the next one.